There was a smell in that hospital room I'll never forget. Antiseptic and old coffee and something else underneath it all. The particular quiet of a place where people go when the world outside has gotten too loud for them to carry. My daughter-in-law Felicia had checked me in on a Tuesday. Anxiety disorder, she told the intake nurse, reading from a printout she prepared like she was filing paperwork. He's been confused, forgetful. We think it's best. My son Nolan stood behind her with his hands in his pockets and didn't look at me once. I was 63 years old, and I had just handed them power of attorney 2 weeks before. I want you to understand something before I go any further. I'm not a man who cries easily. I was a foreman at a sheet metal plant in Cincinnati for 22 years. I coached Little League for 11 seasons. I buried my wife Carolyn 6 years ago, and I did it with dry eyes because she asked me to. She said, "Baby, don't you dare make a scene at my funeral." And I didn't. But sitting in that intake room while Felicia answered questions about me like I wasn't there, I felt something crack open in my chest that I hadn't felt since the night Carolyn got her diagnosis. They gave me a room on the second floor. Pale blue walls, a window that looked out at a parking garage. The nurses were kind enough, but they spoke to me slowly, the way people speak to children, and after the 3rd day I stopped correcting them. My son never came to visit, not once in 3 weeks. Tell us in the comments where you're listening from, and if what I'm about to tell you sounds familiar. If you've ever watched someone you love get erased, slowly, quietly, like they were never real, I need you to keep listening. My name is Samuel, and this is the story of how I got my house back. My youngest daughter Petra found out where I was on a Thursday afternoon. She called the facility from her office in Atlanta because she'd been trying to reach me on my cell phone for 9 days, and Nolan kept telling her I was resting. The woman at the front desk wasn't supposed to confirm I was there, but Petra has a voice that makes bureaucrats nervous. She's 34 years old and she runs the contracts division for a logistics company, and she does not take no for an answer. That part she got from Carolyn. She drove up from Atlanta that same evening. 7 hours. Walked into my room at 9:45 at night with road dust on her shoes and her hair still pulled back from work. "Dad," she said, standing in the doorway. Her face did something complicated. "What is happening?" I told her everything. The power of attorney I'd signed because Nolan said it was just for emergencies. Just a precaution, Dad. You're getting older and we want to make sure things are handled if something happens. The way Felicia had started coming to my house twice a week, bringing meals, asking questions about my finances, looking through my mail. The Tuesday morning she arrived with a duffel bag and said she'd packed some things for me, and Nolan was already in the car, and they thought it would be better if I stayed somewhere comfortable for a while. I'd been too stunned to fight back, 63 years old, and I'd let them walk me out of my own house like a man with no say in anything. Petra sat on the edge of my bed and listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Are you confused? Are you forgetful? Is there anything at all that's been happening that scared you?" "No," I said. "I'm 63. I misplace my keys sometimes. That's it." She nodded slowly. "Okay, then here's what we're going to do." She got me out the next morning. The facility couldn't hold me against my will. I hadn't been committed by a court. I hadn't been deemed a danger to myself or anyone else. I had been admitted voluntarily, which meant legally I could leave voluntarily, power of attorney or not, because that document only covered financial decisions, not where I chose to sleep at night. The administrator was apologetic and uncomfortable. Felicia had apparently called that morning when word got back to Nolan that Petra was there. She'd told them I was confused and unpredictable and the family was concerned. I stood at the discharge desk in the clothes I'd arrived in, and I signed my own release forms with a steady hand, and I looked that administrator in the eye. "There is nothing wrong with me," I said, "and I want that documented." He wrote it down. Petra drove me back to Cincinnati, back to my house on Maple Crest Drive, The house Carolyn and I bought in 1991. The house where Nolan and Petra grew up. The house with the oak tree in the backyard that I'd planted the year Petra was born. Nolan's truck was in the driveway. He came out before we'd even gotten the car doors open. He looked surprised to see me, which told me everything I needed to know about how long he'd expected me to stay in that place. Felicia was right behind him in the doorway, arms crossed, wearing an expression I recognized, the carefully arranged look of someone who has already decided how a conversation is going to go. "Dad?" Nolan started. "You weren't supposed to. This is my house," I said. "I own it. I have owned it for 32 years. The only thing you need to say to me right now is whether you'd like to tell me what's been going on, or whether you'd prefer I figure that out on my own." He looked at Felicia. That small sideways glance. I'd watched them do it 100 times at family dinners when they thought I wasn't paying attention. The silent communication of two people running a joint operation. "Let's go inside," Felicia said. "We can talk like adults." We went inside, and I understood immediately that something had shifted in my house while I was gone. It took me a moment to identify it. Then I realized Carolyn's things were gone. The photographs on the hallway wall, our wedding picture, the kids' school portraits, the photo from our trip to the Smoky Mountains in 2004, gone, replaced with framed prints I'd never seen before. The kind you buy at a home goods store, pale and neutral and belonging to no one. I stood in my own hallway and felt the floor tilt underneath me. "Where are Carolyn's pictures?" I said. "They were a bit outdated," Felicia said behind me. "We were thinking about freshening the space up a little. While you were resting." I turned around slowly. Petra had gone very still beside me. "You took down my wife's photographs," I said. Felicia's expression didn't change. "We can put them back in storage." "Those photographs are not going in storage. They belong on that wall." "Dad," Nolan said, and his voice had taken on the patient, measured tone of a man who'd been practicing this conversation. "You have to understand, Felicia and I have been talking, and with your health situation." "There is no health situation. We think it would make the most sense for us to move in here. To look after the house. It's a lot for one person, and with the power of attorney." I held up one hand. He stopped. "Let me make something very clear," I said. "The power of attorney covers financial decisions in the event that I am legally incapacitated. A doctor signing a voluntary intake form because my daughter-in-law told him I was confused is not incapacitation. I am standing here. I am speaking clearly. I have not been declared incompetent by any court, and this is my house." Felicia took a step forward. "Mr. Samuel," I turned to her. "In 32 years of marriage, Carolyn and I never raised our voices in this house. I'm going to continue that tradition." I said it quietly, but something in the way I said it made her stop. "Nolan," I continued, "I love you. I have loved you every day of your life. But what you have done in the last 3 weeks is something I need you to explain to me clearly and honestly, or I am going to have to make decisions about this power of attorney that neither of us will enjoy." What came out over the next hour was worse than I'd expected, and also somehow exactly what I should have seen coming. Nolan and Felicia were $67,000 in debt, credit cards, a personal loan, a failed business venture Nolan had never told me about, a food truck operation that had gone under in 18 months. They'd been servicing minimum payments for 2 years, barely keeping their heads above water, and Felicia had decided that the solution was my house. Not outright theft, nothing so crude. The plan was more patient than that. Move me to the facility. Establish a pattern of confusion and incapacity. Have Nolan, with power of attorney, eventually sell the house or take out a home equity loan. Use the proceeds to clear their debts and start over. By the time anyone noticed, I'd be settled somewhere, comfortable, and Nolan would have papers explaining every decision. Felicia had thought it through. I'll give her that. What she hadn't thought through was Petra. My daughter said nothing during this conversation. She sat in Carolyn's chair in the living room, the green armchair with the worn right armrest, and she listened with the same expression she gets when she's reading a contract she's about to take apart, line by line. When Nolan finished talking, when all of it had come out, messier and more pathetic than any of them had intended, Felicia tried to reframe it. "We weren't trying to hurt anyone," she said. "We were trying to find a solution. The debt is real. The pressure is real." "We thought you two did go," Petra said. Her voice was pleasant, almost conversational. "You thought he'd let you walk him out of his own life and he'd just accept it. That's not. You took down his wife's photographs. Felicia, he planted that oak tree in the backyard the year I was born. My mother's ashes are under that tree. Did you know that? Did Nolan tell you that?" Nobody said anything. Petra stood up. "She's very small, my daughter. 5'2", same as Carolyn." She walked to the center of the room and looked at my son. "Nolan," she said, "I'm going to need you to hear me very clearly right now. What you have done is elder financial abuse. Under Ohio law, that is a felony. The intake at that facility, combined with the power of attorney and documented evidence of financial motive, gives us a case that I am completely prepared to take to the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office, if that is the direction you want this to go." Nolan's face went white. "Here is what I'm proposing instead," Petra continued. "The power of attorney gets revoked today. We'll have an attorney draw up the paperwork. You and Felicia will find your own living arrangements and your own solution to your debt. Dad stays in his house, and we agree, together as a family, that this does not happen again." Felicia opened her mouth. "The debt is not his problem," Petra said. "You made choices. You managed the consequences. That is how adults work." Nolan sat down on the couch and put his face in his hands. He stayed that way for a long time. "I want you to know I didn't feel triumphant watching my son fall apart like that. He's my child. I changed that boy's diapers. I drove him to his first job interview. I sat with him in the emergency room at 3 in the morning, the night he broke his collarbone playing football in the 9th grade. But I also thought about that Tuesday morning, his hands in his pockets, not once looking at me. 'Nolan,' I said. He looked up. His eyes were red. 'I need to know one thing. Was any of this your idea, or did you go along with it?' He was quiet long enough that I had my answer before he spoke. Finally he said, 'She had the plan. I was scared, Dad. The debt felt like it was swallowing us alive. And Felicia said there was a way. There is always a way that doesn't involve doing this to your father,' I said. 'You could have called me. You could have sat down at this table and told me the truth. I would have helped you. I would have figured something out with you. That is what I'm here for.' He started crying then, 41 years old and crying in his mother's living room, and I sat beside him on the couch because he is my son. And that does not stop being true no matter what he does. But I want to be honest with you about something. Sitting next to him, I was also thinking about Carolyn, about what she would have said, because she knew Nolan better than I did in certain ways, the way mothers do, and I think she would have looked at Felicia very steadily and said, 'My husband is not a resource.' The attorney Petra called was a woman named Andrea Collins, who had an office on East Broad Street and who had handled estate planning and elder law for 25 years. She was there by 2 o'clock that afternoon with a legal pad and a reading glasses case and absolutely no patience for anything that wasn't factual. She reviewed the power of attorney documents, asked me several direct questions, had me sign a formal revocation, and notarized it on the spot. Then she looked at Felicia. 'For the record,' she said, 'voluntary psychiatric admission under false pretenses, combined with documented financial motive and actions taken under power of attorney to alter property, constitutes a reportable offense in this state. I'm advising my client not to pursue that at this time. I'd suggest both of you speak with your own attorney before making any further decisions about anything related to this estate.' Felicia said nothing, but the color in her face changed. They left that evening. Nolan paused at the front door and looked at me. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said. "I know that doesn't fix it." "No," I said, "it doesn't. But it's a start." The door closed. Petra and I stood in the quiet hallway, and I looked at where Carolyn's photographs had been, the bare rectangles on the wall where the paint was slightly darker, the ghost of everything that had been there before. Petra went to the hall closet. She'd found the frames stacked in the back before any of this started, when she first walked through the house. She'd moved them somewhere safer before the conversation began, the way she does things, quietly, ahead of time, without announcing herself. She brought out the wedding photograph first, the one from June 1984. Carolyn in her cream dress, me in the brown suit I thought was so sharp, both of us laughing at something outside the frame, neither of us knowing yet how hard or how beautiful the next 38 years were going to be. I hung it back on the wall. In the months after, things settled in the way that things do, not cleanly, not without residue, but into a shape you can live with. Nolan and Felicia worked out their debt on their own. I won't pretend I know all the details. I know they sold the food truck equipment. I know Nolan picked up extra shifts at his job. I know Felicia's mother gave them some help. None of it involved my house. Nolan called me in October, just to talk. We didn't mention any of what had happened directly. We talked about the Bengals, and about whether I was going to winterize the back garden before the frost, and about a documentary he'd watched on Netflix. It was the most normal conversation we'd had in 2 years. When he hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, thinking about what it costs a person to make a call like that. To dial a number and not know if the person on the other end is going to answer. He called again 2 weeks later. And then again. I don't know if we'll find our way back to what we were before. I've stopped asking that question because I think it's the wrong one. What I ask now is whether we can build something honest, something that doesn't require him to lie to me, or me to pretend I don't know the difference. Petra comes up from Atlanta once a month now. We eat dinner and watch whatever game is on, and sometimes we sit on the back porch and don't say much at all. The oak tree is tall enough now that it shades the whole yard in the evening. 34 years of growing. I had a new will drawn up with Andrea Corrins. Petra has power of attorney, with provisions specific enough that a lawyer would have a hard time misreading them. Everything is documented. Everything is in order. I did what I should have done years ago, what Carolyn used to gently suggest, and I kept putting off because thinking about those things felt like admitting something I wasn't ready to admit. I'm 63. I'm not old, but I'm old enough to know that the people who love you are not always the same as the people who protect you, and that protecting yourself is not the same as not trusting. It just means you don't give anyone, not anyone, the kind of access to your life that they could use to erase it. I think about that room sometimes. The pale blue walls, the parking garage outside the window, the nurses who spoke to me slowly. I wasn't confused when I was in there. But I'll tell you what I was. I was ashamed. Ashamed that I had let it happen. Ashamed that I had signed a document I didn't fully read because my son asked me to, and I loved him, and I wanted to believe that was enough. It took me a while to let go of that shame. Carolyn would have told me to let it go faster. She had very little patience for the kind of guilt that doesn't lead anywhere useful. You learn from it, she'd have said, and then you put it down. You're not required to carry it forever. So I'm putting it down. What I'm carrying instead is this. There are people in your life who will tell you that needing help is the same as being helpless. That getting older means getting smaller. That your house, your memories, the photographs on your wall, all of it is negotiable if they can find the right paperwork. They are wrong. And the moment someone starts treating your life like a problem they need to manage, you have every right, every legal, moral, human right to say no, to make calls, to get in a car and drive 7 hours because your father's phone has been going to voicemail for 9 days and something doesn't feel right. You have the right to stand in your own hallway and say, "This is my house." You have the right to hang the photographs back on the wall. I know there are people watching this who are sitting with something heavy right now. Maybe it's a family member who's been making decisions that don't include you. Maybe it's paperwork you signed that you're not sure about anymore. Maybe it's a situation that smoothed so gradually that you didn't notice how far off course things had drifted, until one day you looked around and nothing looked familiar. I want you to hear me. It is not too late to say something. It is not too late to call your own Petra. It is not too late to stand up. The tree in my backyard is 34 years old. Carolyn is under it, and I can see it from the kitchen window every morning when I make coffee. This house is mine. These walls are mine. That oak tree and every year it took to grow, mine. Nobody gets to take that from me, and nobody gets to take it from you. If someone in your life stood up for you the way Petra stood up for me, or if you've ever had to be that person for someone else, tell me about it in the comments below. I read every single one. Thank you for listening. This is Voices of Uncle Samuel, and I'll see you in the next story. I've been sitting with this story for a long time before I decided to tell it out loud. Not because I'm ashamed of what happened. I've worked through that. But because I wanted to be sure I understood it first. Really understood it. Not just what Nolan and Felicia did, but what allowed it to get that far in the first place. Here's what I came to. Every situation like this one has a before. A long, quiet before, full of small moments where someone chooses convenience over honesty. Nolan didn't wake up one morning and decide to betray his father. It happened in increments. A debt he didn't mention, a conversation he avoided, a plan he let Felicia build because facing me directly felt harder than going around me. That's how these things work. Not in one dramatic choice, but in 100 small surrenders that add up to something you can't take back. And my part in it, because I did have a part, was that I made it too easy to go around me. I signed documents without reading them carefully, because I trusted without verifying. I noticed things that felt off and told myself I was being paranoid. I let the distance between me and my son grow without ever sitting down and saying, "What's actually going on with you?" Love without attention is not enough. I know that now. What saved me was Petra. Not because she's some kind of exceptional person, though she's remarkable, but because she paid attention. She counted the days of unanswered calls. She got in her car. She walked through my house and noticed what was missing before I even had a chance to look around. Attentiveness is a form of love that doesn't get talked about enough. It's not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up. There's a cause and effect to all of this that I think about often. Felicia built her plan on the assumption that I was isolated, that no one was watching closely enough to notice. The moment that assumption turned out to be wrong, the entire plan collapsed. Not because of a confrontation, not because of raised voices or dramatic gestures, but because one person cared enough to pay attention and then had the courage to say clearly what she saw. That's the lesson I carry. Not that you should distrust your family. That's too simple and too sad. But that trust without structure is a vulnerability. That love has to be paired with clarity. You tell people what your wishes are. You put things in writing. You don't leave the important decisions vague, because vagueness is an invitation to anyone who wants to fill in the blanks for you. And when something feels wrong, when calls go unanswered, when explanations don't quite add up, when the photographs come off the walls, you don't talk yourself out of what you're noticing. You act on it. You make the call. You drive the 7 hours. The oak tree in my backyard is still there. Carolyn's picture is back on the wall. I make my coffee every morning, and I look out at that tree and I think about what it means to tend something over decades, to show up for it through every season, not just the easy ones. That's what I want to leave you with. Tend your people. Tend your relationships, and tend yourself, your documents, your intentions, your voice. Because the moment you go quiet about what matters to you, someone else will start making decisions in that silence. Don't let them.